Okay, in this session, as I said, we're going to look at the explore, identify and gather phase. So these are the ones here: explore, identify and gather. Again, going back to the design thinking concept, the explore is getting them to look at different resources where they would find the information, so exposing them to a multiple array and variety of resources and sources where they would get that. Here they're then identifying their inquiry question or their problem statement, and then they're starting to gather and capture the information that they need. So that is through the area, to a certain extent, under design thinking, where you're looking at some synthesis and ideation processes. So in this first part here, the explore phase, what they're doing here is browsing various sources to explore their interest, to help them to start to target their inquiry question. Traditionally, what we tend to do is we give them the research task or the assignment task, and then we might do a little bit about identifying keywords and so forth, and then we tend to throw them in. And this is where the research that sits behind guided inquiry design, the research indicates this is where they experience overwhelm, they get stressed, they stall, they to a certain extent they give up. So we need to guide them so that they can browse and scan and note the relevant resources that they need. The thinking here that's happening is emergent thinking, so they're going through a thinking process that looks for patterns of connection and patterns of interaction with information and how things relate to each other. So in some ways, what they're trying to do is see what happens when they make some combinations of information that they find. Is it something that's going to stimulate them to say, well, I want to explore this further in my research that I'm going to do? Then this is the core part. This is where they're actually looking at constructing an inquiry question from the ideas that they've been exposed to. They look for either a question, or they could go for a problem statement that they need to solve. Somehow they need to reach a point where they start to narrow down and hone their line of inquiry that they're going to undertake. Now this is where we get into convergent thinking, because this is a thinking process that focuses on coming up with a single well-established query, inquiry, problem that they want to answer. So they want to find an answer to the problem, to the issue, to the idea, to the situation. So they're selecting and refining down what it is that they're going to be trying to explore. Then they start the gather process. And this is when they first start to collect detailed information from a variety of sources to answer their inquiry question. They're going to be involved in locating, they're going to be involved in evaluating and sifting and sorting and using the information to identify what is going to be most appropriate for them to answer the question. Some of you may have heard of the term CRAP test, and that means they're putting information to the test of whether it's current, whether it's relevant, whether it's authentic, and whether its purpose is to inform. So that's why we call it the CRAP test. The idea is that they go broad, in that they're looking across a range of resources. They're not just going into one resource to find the answer to their inquiry question. They're looking across a range of resources, and then they start to go deep. They choose a core of the most relevant resources for them to be able to find the information that they need. The thinking here is emergent thinking, where they're looking again for those patterns of information connectivity, and so they're looking at integrating, analysing, relating, categorising, working out what is the best combination of information for them to answer their question. So here are some points for reflection. The first one on the left is: how and where do you allow students explore the content ideas? How do you do that? Then what techniques do you use to help students to identify their inquiry question? Or do you just provide it? But if we're looking at allowing them to take ownership and be more engaged, we need to be guiding them in identifying that. What scaffolds do you have in place to help students gather their information? Again, I'm wanting you to look at an existing curriculum unit and identify and record the similarities and differences between your unit and the guided inquiry design framework. The tools again in case you kind of jump to this one before the other, the double bubble, and the links are there, and then the Venn diagrams or contrast T-chart. Now these are just 3 examples. You might have another template tool that you use which does look at capturing the similarities and differences of material. So that's the end of this second session, and the next session I want to go into the final phases of learning, which is the create, share and evaluate. So we'll see you shortly once you've done that reflection to look at the similarities and difference between your unit and the guided inquiry, and how there are things within those phases of learning that you could start to look at what you might flip in your classroom.